Hi, I'm Naomi. I thought the house was mine. Grandpa had told me so a dozen times in that steady, quiet way he always spoke. Never dramatic, just sure. He'd smile, ruffle my hair even when I was too old for that, and say, "This place has good bones, just like you." And I believed him. I never had a reason not to, until I pulled up to the house and saw someone else's name on the mailbox. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of late spring. The gravel crunched under my tires, that same comforting sound from when I was a kid riding my bike up the driveway. But nothing else felt right. The nameplate. That was the first blow. It used to say Morris, our family name. Grandpa had polished it every Sunday like it was sacred. Now it read, Annika Langley, my cousin, who couldn't be bothered to visit when Grandpa got sick, who once faked a sprained ankle to get out of raking leaves with us. That Anika. For a second, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I was early. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe something. But the way my stomach dropped, I already knew. I opened the mailbox, half expecting something with my name on it. A letter. From the lawyer. A note from Grandpa, even though I knew that was ridiculous. Instead, a coupon for dog food and a real estate flyer. Annika's face was on it, smiling like she had just won a game she didn't know the rules to. I stood there for a minute, just holding it, like I could will it to turn into something else. But it didn't. I made my way to the front door. The ceramic frog was still there, on the porch, chipped on one side, guarding the same old hiding spot. The key was still underneath. That felt like something. Like he hadn't given up on me, even if everyone else had. The second I stepped inside, the scent hit me. Lemon oil. And something sterile. Like they were trying to scrub out the past. The walls looked cleaner, but emptier. I could feel how different it was before I even reached the living room. Boxes lined the walls, stacked with precision, each one labeled with Sharpie like someone was moving out of a hotel room, not a home. Living room, decor, books, miscellaneous. Donate. Then I saw it. One box shoved off to the side, barely noticeable. The handwriting was messy, like an afterthought. Naomi's childhood room. Sort later. Like even my memories had been put on hold. I walked slowly down the hall, the sound of my footsteps too loud on the floors. Grandpa always said these floors creaked like they had opinions. Today they felt tired, empty. My room was open, cleared out. Two sad boxes in the closet, both marked the same: miss, dispose, or donate. I sat on the edge of the mattress, or where it used to be. The bed was stripped, the indent gone. It wasn't just that it was cleaned, it was erased. No one had called. No one had asked. Not even a text. I pressed my hands against my thighs, breathing through the sharp ache rising in my throat. I knew grief was supposed to come in waves. But this wasn't grief. This was demolition. I stood up, a little shaky, and leaned on the old dresser for balance. Then I walked back into the hallway. That's when I heard her voice. "Oh, Naomi, you're here early." My mother. Standing there. Like she hadn't just buried her father a week ago. Like she was walking into brunch. Lipstick perfect. Hair curled. Heels sharp against the wood. "Early for what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled. That kind of smile you use when delivering bad news like it's a favor. "Annika's been staying here, helping with the transition. We're getting the house ready to list." I just stared at her. "List what?" She tilted her head as if the question confused her. "The house, sweetheart. You know how old it is? The upkeep alone would drown you." She walked past me and adjusted a frame on the wall like everything was perfectly normal, like this wasn't the middle of a storm. I started, then stopped. Grandpa told me. He said the house would be mine. She didn't. Pause. Well, plans change, and you know your grandfather wasn't exactly known for handling paperwork. I couldn't answer. I just let the words hang there, heavy and unfinished, and walked past her toward the study. I didn't know where I was going exactly. Maybe just somewhere familiar. Somewhere that still felt like him. But nothing felt familiar. Not anymore. And in the quiet, I remembered the last thing Grandpa ever said to me in that house. We were standing by the fireplace. He patted the mantel with his calloused hand and looked at me like he was telling me a secret. "It's got good bones," he said. "Just like you." My father was already waiting in the living room when I got there. He was leaning against the fireplace like it was just another evening, like the house he was standing in hadn't just been ripped from under me. On the coffee table sat a thick folder. I knew before even opening it that it wasn't for me. It was about me. My name was printed neatly on the label, and inside, pages of sale documents, transaction forms, and real estate agreements. Then I saw it, my signature. On the seller's line. I just stared at it, the loops of my name, every letter looking exactly how I write it. Except I hadn't. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to sell. I hadn't even known there was a sale. "I didn't sign this," I said. My voice came out flat, too steady for how fast my heart was pounding. My dad exhaled like he'd been expecting this. "You didn't need to. The property was in the family trust. That gives us executive authority." I blinked at him. "You forged my name." He raised his hands like he was calming a child. "Naomi, it's not like that. We did what was necessary. You've got a full-time job, Bills. You live in an apartment without even laundry in the unit. How are you going to handle a property like this?" "I wasn't supposed to handle it," I said slowly. "I was supposed to inherit it." Didn't answer. Just looked down like maybe that word, inherit, meant something heavier than he was willing to carry. I didn't say anything else. I walked past him, past the sofa where Annika had left a designer bag slouched against a cushion, past the boxes and labels and the peeling photo of us on the shelf. I went straight to the study. That room had always been Grandpa's. Even when I was little, it felt off limits unless he invited me in. But I'd spent hours there anyway, curled up on the rug while he scribbled notes or fixed old radios that no longer picked up stations. The air smelled the same, faintly of cedar and ink, even if the curtains had been changed. I stepped toward the desk and began opening drawers, careful not to shift anything too much. Most were empty or filled with pens and old receipts. Until the last one on the right. It was locked. I knelt down, running my fingers along the edge, and that's when I saw them, my initials. NL, carved just below the keyhole. Small, almost invisible. But they were there. It didn't feel like coincidence. I pressed my palm against the wood and whispered, "You promised." Just to say it out loud. Just to hear it spoken into the air, even if no one answered. After a few moments, I stood. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just walked out. By the time I got home, the sky was darker than I remembered it being. The drive back blurred into the kind of silence that feels like you're underwater. Not sad, not angry, just quiet. Dropped my keys onto the table, kicked off my shoes, and sat down with the folder. I flipped back to the page with my signature. The date caught my eye, May 13th. That stopped me, because on May 13th, I wasn't even in the state. I was in Seattle speaking at a librarian conference. I still had the lanyard in my purse, the hotel receipt in my inbox. My panel had been recorded. There were photos, emails, social posts. I pulled out my laptop and started gathering everything. Flight, confirmation, return ticket, event schedule, photos from the panel. One of me on stage, microphone in hand, under a banner that read, National Literacy Symposium, May 11-16. The signature on that sale form, it was dated right in the middle of that week. I hadn't signed a damn thing. And whoever did, they knew what they were doing. They matched the tilt of my letters, the way I curl the loop on my N, the tiny flare I always add at the end of my I. I stared at it for a long time, that fake version of my name. It looked like me. But it wasn't me. And then, something shifted. The betrayal wasn't just theirs anymore. It had shape now. Evidence. Something I could hold. Something I could do something about. I stood, moved to my desk, and pulled out a plastic folder I hadn't touched in years. I wrote across the front in thick black ink. Truth. I slid everything inside. The emails, the flight info, the forged documents. They thought I'd be too shocked to react. Too soft. Too quiet. But they'd mistaken quiet for weak, and they were about to find out the difference. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept playing the conversation over and over in my head. My dad's calm voice, the way he said executive authority, like it was a permission slip to erase me. The forged signature. The mailbox with Annika's name. It all spun in a slow, bitter loop. I got up around midnight, walked to the hallway, and stopped in front of the old family tablet. It hadn't been used in months, maybe a year. I almost didn't bother. But then I remembered, years ago, I helped my mom reset a password. She'd synced everything. Her messages, photos, backups. I turned the tablet on and held my breath. It still worked. I tapped into the Messages app. At first, it was all old grocery lists and appointment reminders. But then I scrolled further, right around the time Grandpa passed. That's when things changed. One message. From my dad to someone named Edward. We've got her, don't worry. She won't contest. She's passive. Passive. Another from my mom. She's always been a silent one. That's why she's perfect. I took a screenshot. Then another. And another. Each one like a pin in my chest. They didn't just make a mistake. They counted on my silence. They planned around it. Like it was a weakness. Like I was background noise they could mute whenever. It got inconvenient. Quiet isn't weak. You just thought it meant I'd disappear. I sent the screenshots to my email, then copied them onto a USB drive I kept in my desk drawer, the same one I used in college to back up research papers. I labeled it the same way I did the folder. Truth. By 2 a.m., I had a file the size of a case, the forged signature, the conference proof, the messages, the trust paperwork, all of it. I sat down and stared at it. Everything spread across the table. My coffee cold, my hands steady for the first time in days. I thought of Grandpa, how careful he always was with documents, how he'd double-check every line before he signed anything. Then I thought of someone who might understand. Maya Tran. We went to college together. She went into family law, and I remember her telling me once, people get really brave with other people's names on paper. It was half a joke, but it stuck. I texted her before sunrise, just a simple message. Hey, I have something I need to show you. It's urgent, she replied within minutes. Come by at 8. No appointment needed. When I arrived at her office, she was already there, hair pulled back, no makeup, coffee in hand, wearing that expression she always had before finals. Sharp, focused, unflinching. She sat across from me as I laid out the documents, the screenshots, the sale papers, Grandpa's old trust copy, my Seattle flight itinerary, everything. She didn't speak right away. Just flipped through each page, reading closely, her brow furrowed. Then she paused. She turned back to the will. There, near the bottom, in a line I hadn't noticed before, was a small clause. She tapped it. Here. This right here changes everything. It was barely a sentence. This property may not be sold, transferred, or reassigned under any family trust authority without the express in-person signature of Naomi Langley, witnessed by 2 independent parties. My mouth went dry. So, they couldn't do what they did? Not legally, she said. The trust gave them some control, but this clause overrides it. And forging your signature? She looked up at me. That's fraud. Criminal fraud. I stared at the paper, my name printed in that thick final font. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I exhaled, slowly. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air filled my lungs without pain. Maya leaned back in her chair. We're going to file for an emergency injunction to halt the sale. And I'll be sending a letter to the buyer before noon. If he knew about this, he's complicit. If he didn't, he's about to be very interested. Something shifted in my chest, like a floorboard clicking back into place. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't powerless in this. I wasn't just someone they could quietly remove from the story, because now I had something they didn't expect. I had proof, and I had a voice, and I was done staying quiet. The house was empty when I pulled into the driveway. No cars, no voices, just the soft rustle of wind through the trees and the gravel under my tires. It looked almost peaceful from the outside, like it hadn't been the center of betrayal and paperwork and forged signatures. But something pulled me back there anyway. I couldn't explain it. Just this quiet sense that Grandpa had left something more, something he didn't want anyone else to find. The porch steps creaked the same way they always had. The flower pot still held the spare key. Some things, I guess, didn't change. Inside, it smelled like citrus cleaner and dust. Not like Grandpa, not really. But I walked through it slowly, like I was retracing his steps. The living room was mostly cleared out now, the boxes stacked tighter, labels sharper. But the photos on the shelf were still there, at least for now. One frame caught my eye. It was us, me and Grandpa and his old dog Max, taken on the porch the summer I turned 10. I remember that day so clearly. Max had drooled on my lap and Grandpa had said, "That's how you know he likes you." I picked up the frame, but something felt off, heavier than it should have been. I turned it over. The back had tiny screws holding it closed, not the usual pop-in tab. My heart picked up pace. In the kitchen drawer, I found the little red-handled screwdriver he always kept near the sink. I used to pretend it was a wand when I was a kid. I unscrewed the frame carefully. Behind the photo, taped to the inside, was a small brass key, tarnished and warm from being hidden so long. My hands started to shake. I walked the house slowly, scanning for anything that might fit the key. I don't know how I knew where to look. I just ended up in the den, by the fireplace. The floor, there had always been slightly uneven. Grandpa used to joke the house had a stubborn spine. Then I saw it. One floorboard smoother than the others, worn down like it had been touched 1,000 times. I knelt and ran my hand along the edge. There, a small notch shaped like a heart. Faint, almost invisible. But there. The key slid in and turned with a soft click. The board lifted with a groan. Beneath it was a small fireproof box, no bigger than a shoebox. I pulled it out slowly and sat back on the rug, the key still in my hand. My breath caught somewhere between fear and hope. Inside the box, wrapped in an old flannel cloth, was a USB drive, a folded letter, and an envelope with one word on the front: Carson. I held the envelope for a long moment. Mr. Carson lived 2 houses down. He and Grandpa had been friends for as long as I could remember. They used to sit on the porch together, drink lemonade, and argue about baseball stats like it was a job. He was the kind of neighbor who always waved, even if he never said much. I tucked everything into my bag and drove over. His porch looked smaller than I remembered, but the wind chime, made of old spoons and bike parts, still hung by the door, tinkling softly in the breeze. Before I could knock, the door opened. "Naomi Langley," he said, like he'd been expecting me. "I wondered when you'd come." He looked older than I remembered, his back a little more hunched, but his eyes were sharp. "Kind. I have something for you," he said, ushering me inside. "Your granddad gave it to me last fall. Told me not to hand it over unless you asked." He led me to the kitchen table. On it sat a flash drive, a cassette tape, and an old photo, me, Grandpa, and Max under the backyard willow tree. I was missing a front tooth and beaming like I'd just won something. On the back, in Grandpa's handwriting, "She remembers what matters." I sat down slowly. My hands couldn't stop shaking. Mr. Carson popped the cassette into a little digital converter and pressed play. Grandpa's voice filled the room, soft but clear. "They'll tear it apart, Carson, bit by bit, if I don't lock it down." "You've written the will," Carson's voice replied, faint in the background. "It's not about paperwork, it's about intention. Naomi understands that. She always did." I pressed my hands to my face. "She won't fight for herself," Grandpa continued, "but she'll fight for the meaning. That's why she's the keeper of the flame." I didn't even try to stop the tears then. They came slow, steady, almost silent. He knew. All along, he knew I'd come. He always knew. We walked into the office just after 9. The receptionist looked up, her fingers pausing mid-click on the keyboard. Maya didn't wait for her to speak. She slid the envelope across the counter and said, calm as ever, please, let Mr. Albrecht know this is regarding the Langley property. He'll want to see it. The woman blinked, glanced down at the bold letters on the envelope, cease and desist, and quickly disappeared into the hallway. A minute later, the door opened and there he was. Edward Albrecht, the buyer, late 40s, pressed shirt, too much, cologne, and a jaw that looked like it had never clenched for anything but golf. His confident smile faltered when he saw Maya standing beside me. Maya Tran, she said, holding out a hand he didn't take. I'm representing Naomi Langley, the rightful heir to the property your firm attempted to purchase under forged documentation. His face twitched. Your mother handled the paperwork. We were told she had legal authority. Maya pulled a document from her folder, turned it to face him. She didn't. This clause in the original will, signed and notarized, requires Naomi's in-person signature, witnessed, which never happened. She laid down a copy of the forged sale agreement. And this, her voice sharpened just slightly, is a federal crime. Edward looked at me then, really looked at me. Like maybe for the first time he understood I wasn't just some grieving girl too emotional to bother with. He cleared his throat. I'm withdrawing my offer immediately. I'll be speaking with legal regarding everything. He turned back toward his office. This wasn't disclosed, and if the trust lied, that's on them. As he walked away, Maya leaned toward me and said under her breath, that's the sound of someone realizing they've been caught laundering stolen property. The sale was frozen before noon. When I got back to the house, it was quiet again. That strange, too clean silence that had settled in since the day of the funeral. I walked through the room slowly, not looking for anything, just checking. Seeing if the house still felt like him. It didn't. Not yet. I turned the corner into the dining room and froze. One of Grandpa's paintings, the one of the Colorado peaks we hiked together, was leaning against the wall. But something was off. The colors were too bold, the texture too flat. I stepped closer, reached out, and ran my fingers along the edge. It wasn't canvas, it was synthetic. I flipped it over and saw the faint label in the corner. Reproduction 2023. They weren't just selling the house. They were replacing everything inside it, swapping out Grandpa's life for fake versions and cashing in on the difference. I moved quickly, climbing the narrow staircase to the attic, my pulse thudding in my ears. It had been years since I'd been up there. Dust clung to the beams and the light barely reached past the first few feet. But I scanned the space slowly, methodically, until I saw it. A metal safe, tucked behind an old chest, half hidden beneath a drop cloth. No keyhole, just a keypad. I stared at it, trying to think like him. What would he use? What would he trust? Me to remember, I tried birthdays. Nothing. My college graduation. Still wrong. Then I remembered. Our dog Lyra. He adopted her on April 17th. The same day every year he left honeysuckle on the porch. I typed 0417, click. The door creaked open. Inside were rolled documents, sealed envelopes, a stack of certificates, appraisals, original ownership records, insurance letters confirming their value. These weren't just sentimental keepsakes. They were significant. They were worth real money. And buried at the bottom, a single folded note in his handwriting. If they get desperate, they'll trade meaning for money. Don't let them. These pieces were collected with memory. You're the only one who saw that. I sank down against the attic wall, the paper in my lap, the whole room tilting with the weight of it all. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. Maya, your mother filed a response, she said. She's claiming mental instability, that you're not fit to manage the property, that your grief compromised judgment. I didn't speak at first, just closed my eyes. Then I said, steady as stone, let her try. Maya paused. You okay? I looked around at the attic, the place they didn't bother to check. the pieces they thought no one would notice. The truth they didn't expect to find me. I've got the documents, the appraisals. Grandpa's own words. I stood, the paper still in my hand. I've got the truth. I heard the engine before I saw them. A moving van pulled up to the curb like it belonged there. Behind it, a sleek black SUV came to a too-clean stop. I didn't have to see the license plate to know who was inside. I stood by the window, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the record button. My heart was calm. Not quiet, exactly, but steady. Like it knew this moment had been circling for a long time. The doors opened. My mother, Celeste, stepped out first, wearing heels sharp enough to split marble. Behind her came two men in tailored suits, briefcases in hand, faces blank. The kind of people who charge by the hour to bulldoze whatever's in the way. They didn't knock. Celeste walked straight in like she still owned the air inside the house. She barely looked at me as she tossed a folder onto the dining table. "This was never just about you," she said, voice clipped. I didn't flinch. I opened the side drawer and pulled out my own folder. Then, calmly, I walked to the old laptop I'd set up on the console earlier that morning. I plugged in the USB Grandpa left me and hit play. The screen flickered, and there he was. His face older than I remembered, eyes tired but clear. His voice, rough and familiar, filled the room. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then they did what I feared. But Naomi will remember. She always listened. She knew what this house meant." No one moved. Celeste's jaw clenched. "This proves nothing." He was emotional. "You know how he romanticized everything. We have contracts. We have legal backing." Maya stepped forward, smooth as silk, her voice even. "You have nothing but lies, forged signatures, fraud, tampering, unauthorized transfers of property, and now we have the will, the amendment, the video testimony, and text messages." She dropped printed screenshots onto the table, in which both of you clearly state that Naomi would stay passive and wouldn't contest. One of the attorneys picked up the pages. His eyes moved quickly. Then slowly. The second one stopped flipping entirely. Edward Albrecht stepped through the front door behind them, holding his phone like it had just betrayed him. He looked at the documents Maya was holding, then at me. I believed the wrong people, he said, voice low. "I'm out." Celeste turned to him. "You can't just walk away." "I can," he said, sharper now. "And I will." She turned back to me, her face hardening. "Do you really think this little show changes anything?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even move. "They tried to sell what wasn't theirs," I said, "and erase what they didn't understand." No one spoke. No one needed to. Celeste looked around the room like she was seeing it for the first time. Not the furniture or the walls, but the cracks. The spaces she couldn't fill in. The parts of Grandpa she couldn't rewrite. She picked up the folder she'd brought in and held it to her chest like a shield. Outside, the movers waited, leaning against the truck, checking their phones, already sensing that the job was done before it started. Maya packed up the documents slowly, deliberately. As the attorneys turned to leave, one of them murmured to the other, "Should have checked the clause." The house was quiet again. But this time the silence felt like it belonged to me, like it was waiting. 3 weeks passed. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that aches. It was a softer kind, a lived-in kind, the kind of quiet that settles after the storm breaks and the sky decides to hold still. Celeste and Thomas were both facing charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy to defraud an heir. The words sounded cold in the courtroom, but they landed with weight, and they stuck. Annika cut a deal. She avoided trial by turning over everything she had: emails, receipts, backups of the original appraisals they tried to fake. Then she vanished. Not even a goodbye. Just gone. I didn't chase her. The buyer walked away without looking back, and Edward, he testified, gave a short statement, said plainly, "I believed the wrong people." He didn't try to make it right, but he didn't try to dodge the truth either. And that was enough for me. The deed is officially in my name now. But I never just wanted to own the house. That wasn't the point. So I began something new. The living room, once boxed and gutted, is now a cozy reading space. Every Wednesday, a small group of seniors from the neighborhood gathers there. They sip coffee, share stories, and pass around dog-eared novels like sacred things. The spare room is now an art corner, filled with donated supplies, mismatched chairs, and kids who can't afford summer programs but still want to paint something. Beautiful. Grandpa's old garden shed? I cleaned it out, rewired the lights, and turned it into a tiny workshop. We host basic woodworking classes twice a month. Last Saturday, a high schooler built their first birdhouse there. The look on his face, focused, proud, felt like something I'd seen before. Mr. Carson still visits. He walks slower now, but his eyes always land on the hallway where I hung the old photo. Me, Grandpa, and Max under the willow. One afternoon, he brought a small brass plaque and gently screwed it into the wall beneath the frame. It reads, "She remembers what matters." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. He squeezed my hand, and that was enough. The house doesn't feel like a battlefield anymore, or a museum. It feels alive. Yesterday, I went into the study. Really went in. It's the one room I hadn't touched much since everything settled. The smell of ink and cedar was still there, faint but familiar. I opened the last drawer I hadn't checked. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook wrapped in a faded napkin from the diner Grandpa used to take me to on Saturdays. The final page was dated 3 days before he passed. The handwriting was a little shaky, but still unmistakably his. It said, "Redemption is heavier than revenge, and more lasting. You remembered, Naomi. You kept the house alive." I sat there for a while, holding it to my chest, letting the stillness wrap around me. Not everything had been saved. Not every scar would fade. But what mattered? The meaning, the memory, the heart of this place. It was still here. Still standing, and so was I. If you've ever had to fight for something others thought you just let go, drop a comment. I'd really love to hear your story too. And if this one meant something to you, feel free to subscribe. There's more. I want to share. This house taught me something. Not everything worth keeping looks like a win. Sometimes it just looks like a light still on in the window.